Welcome to AIM OnAir, the official podcast of the Association for Intelligent Information Management. Founded in 1944, AIM is dedicated to advancing the information management industry. We represent a vibrant global community of information leaders committed to driving exceptional business outcomes through information management fueled by technology like AI and automation. You can learn more at AIIM.org. I'm AIM President and CEO, Tori Miller Liu, and I am very pleased to welcome our guest today. He has had years of successful leadership within Fortune 100 companies like IBM, JP Morgan Chase, and Weyerhaeuser. He is experienced in senior management, development, design, installation, support, and documentation of complex systems, including enterprise content management, ECMs, and software development and delivery and architecture. He is a veritable legend here at AIM as a former AIM board member and officer and a member of the AIM Company of Fellows. He is currently the principal SharePoint Premium Architect with Microsoft. And please welcome Ian Story. Welcome to AIM OnAir, Ian.
Thanks, Tori. That's a long intro. So it means I'm old and I've been in this industry for a long time, I think. So
And there's no editing the intro.
Yep. You should have read that when I wasn't on the call.
Sorry.
Okay.
But it's a great resume, and I think it's really makes clear that you have a ton of industry knowledge and experience, and I think it's fair to say you've seen this industry go through many different phases. The most recent probably being what we'll call like the Gen AI phase or the AI phase, where we're clearly in an AI summer right now. So what do you think about this particular phase that we're in right now?
Yeah, I'm glad it's an AI summer and not an AI winter, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, you think about the Gartner hype cycle. We're going up to the peak of inflated expectations, right? Hopefully, the trough of disillusionment isn't too deep, but there's still a lot of expectations that AI is going to change everything and AI might take over the world and so forth. But there's wonderful practical uses of AI, like you and I were talking about, things that AIM will use AI for from this podcast even, right? And so tons of great practical uses. And I think probably now it's real enough that the things that we've talked about in the industry as the vendors for maybe the last 5 years are actually doable. The same thing happened with workflow, the same thing happened with analytics, the same thing happened with cloud and mobile, where the vendors would kind of be out, relabeling everything as, RPA maybe a few years ago, relabeling everything as workflow maybe 20 years ago, and so forth. And expectations were really high compared to what it could do. And I think for the last few years, everything's been being relabeled as AI. And we're right at the point now where it's actually, able to live up to a lot of the hype, not all of the hype, but a lot of the hype is you can actually do real valuable things with it.
Do you think it's practical at this point to consider AI to be an enterprise solution? Is it ready for that in most cases?
Yeah, I mean, my day job is at Microsoft. And so, we make Copilot and we have Copilot throughout tons of different experiences, everything from the PC with the new Copilot PCs to, Microsoft 365 and integrated into Bing and Word and SharePoint and on and on and on. Teams, of course. So yeah, I mean, we would say Copilot is definitely an enterprise solution, huge uptake among our large enterprise customers, and lots of excitement about all the things that you can do with Copilot. So, when it comes to enterprise AI, I'll sound like a Microsoft guy. I think we're leading the way, right? There are others that are more consumer focused, go use ChatGPT for this or that, right? Or go do Gemini for this or that. But in the enterprise, there's no question, I think, that Copilot is the leader.
Since Copilot itself is still I think, a pretty new product. I mean, I think you're right that it's reached a point of maturity where it's being better adopted by enterprises and more widely adopted, but it is still a pretty new product. What is that feedback loop like? I imagine, like, is Microsoft learning from customers as it goes and like regularly
Sure.
improving? Yeah.
We learn from customers every day, many times a day as they, adopt the products or have challenges adopting the products or what have you. Lots of feedback, lots of research that happens. We have teams of people, frankly, that are out there learning from the feedback that we get from customers. We try to do things from the responsible AI perspective, where if the AI does something unexpected, you can provide that to us, give us that feedback, let us know what happened, what your concerns are, et cetera. We don't sit there and monitor what you do with the AI, right? We're not mining it, we're not training things on it, or using what you do to train future AIs and so forth. That's one of the core promises that we make from a responsible AI perspective. But we are very, very open to the feedback from customers, and we get lots of that feedback from customers, both about, well, I hoped it would do this and it doesn't, and also, I had no idea it could do that. Oh my gosh, right? So we get both of those things every day. And so when we hear I wish it would do this, but it didn't, then we try to make it able to do that. And when we get oh my gosh, that's amazing, then we try to share those stories and so forth, right?
That's really great, and I feel like that's an interesting model for your customers too, because
Yep.
as a former CIO, I think that level of attention to customer experience and agility is really important even within your enterprise. How do I take the feedback that I'm hearing from my internal clients and feed that to my vendors like Microsoft or others, right? That's it's a really interesting feedback loop to introduce.
Yep. Yeah, we're really careful when we roll out AI capabilities wherever they are, whether they're Copilot or otherwise, to make sure that there's a way for you to give us feedback very easily. Simple things from like a thumbs up, thumbs down to, 2 questions for NPS type surveys on, would you recommend this experience to someone else, et cetera. So we're always looking to gather that feedback and have a lot of humans and also a lot of systems that kind of sort through that and analyze the feedback and give us good direction on how we can improve things.
Are you using AI to monitor our feedback?
Of course, of course. Yeah, I mean, just the amount of feedback that we get is overwhelming, when you think about all the people out there using all the different Microsoft tools, everything from Word and Excel and PowerPoint on your desktop to our Bing capabilities and the stuff built into the Windows operating system and into SharePoint and Teams and so forth. Like, the amount of feedback that we get is overwhelming. We obviously read as much of it as we can, but realistically, can we read every single possible thing? We absolutely use AI to help us sort through all that. Of course, it's an overwhelming amount of information.
Which I imagine is also good because you're kind of your own guinea pigs. I'm
Oh, for
assuming
sure.
like most products Microsoft has tested first on
Yep.
their own
Yes.
staff.
All products Microsoft has tested first on our own staff, sometimes much to the dismay and frustration of our internal IT department, and also end users. Some days I can't send an email, and that's a frustrating day, right? When you're relying on email to get the job done. But it's better that it happens to me than it happens to you, right? So
Yeah.
we definitely try to, whether that's drink our own champagne from the really positive way to think of it, or eat our own dog food from the very negative way to think of it. We are really, really thoughtful about doing that before we, ship any software to any customer.
And thank you for your sacrifice. So I don't have to deal with
It's
it.
not that much of a sacrifice. We're happy to do it. It's fun when you write software to play with it yourself before you
Yeah.
others. So, yep.
Okay, so since we're talking about software and Copilot, this summer Microsoft is rolling out Copilot for OneDrive. So how is that going to change how we manage information as individuals and for organizations?
Yeah, both Copilot for OneDrive and Copilot for SharePoint rolling out over the course of the next few weeks. OneDrive has started, SharePoint's coming soon. And, it really gives you just the ability to do simplistic things like, summarize this document or compare these 2 documents, or, select a set of 5 documents and then make a table for me based on those and so forth. To more advanced things like you have a question and you can't figure out the answer, or you don't have time to read all 100 pages or what have you, and you can just ask a question of a document. So we have kind of related functionality that's not particularly Copilot, something called autofill that will allow you to do, frankly, things that we've done in the information management world for years, which is extract metadata from documents. So you could have, for instance, a set of contracts or invoices, and you have a set of columns or fields that you want to extract, and you write a simple prompt for each one, like, what is the total of this invoice? What is the expiration date of this contract? And then you run it, and we extract all that metadata for you. What's really interesting, though, is extraction is kind of the least powerful thing that we do. You can also have it do things like one of our MVPs at Microsoft, we have this program of kind of our community leaders, our best and brightest out in the community, called the MVP program. One of our MVPs used autofill to write a prompt on some FAA documentation. And his prompt was something like, pretend that you are an aircraft accident investigator. Review this document and identify the 3 most likely problems that would cause an airplane to crash based on this document, or why an airplane crashed based on this document. And that was his prompt. And so he had a set of airplane crash investigation documents and that prompt, and it went through all of them and listed out for each one the most likely reasons that the airplane had a problem or had an incident. So amazing things like that that are not just simple extraction of metadata, but doing more interesting things. Or, we have a customer who has done a really simple workflow, basically in a prompt that is, figure out the total of the invoice. Duh, everybody can do that. We've been doing that for 20 or 30 years in this industry with simple capture software that, finds it on the page and extracts it. But figure out the total on the invoice. And if the invoice is under $1,000, approve it. And if it's over $1,000, say it needs more review, and put that value, not the total, but put that value, do the evaluation and put that value in the field, which you can then run a workflow on and so forth. So some really neat things beyond just extracting metadata or doing summarization or asking questions of a document.
So let me go back to that FAA example, because one thing I'm curious about is so say you have that operational, and on a regular basis, you're getting this AI output around why the accident happened.
Yep.
Am I then able to take that output and put it in a separate repository so I can actually do analysis on the top
Sure.
reasons why the incident happened?
Yeah, in this case, the feature we're talking about is the feature called autofill, and it populates into a SharePoint, you know, document library just as a column. And those document libraries can be exported to Power BI or exported as, Excel files, or used from other applications and so forth, right? It's just the metadata on the document. So yeah, you can do all kinds of amazing things with that. We have a set of connectors with Power Automate that allows you to, pull that data out and do all kinds of things, thousands of different systems that you can integrate it with. So, maybe you want to feed that to your ERP or your CRM, probably not in the case of FAA investigations, but, if these were, customer documents, know your customer type things in the legal world or something like that, then yeah, absolutely. We have a really connected ecosystem of capabilities that surround kind of the core, we'll call it content service, that is SharePoint inside of Microsoft 365. So yeah, definitely.
Do you think then that it's important for the enterprise to somehow use metadata to denote that that output was an AI output? And if
Yeah,
so,
so we,
does
yeah,
Microsoft do that?
yep. We actually, when we do this, provide the feedback that this was done by AI. What's interesting about it is when you have a system like this, you can label that it was done by AI, and maybe people are, trust but verify type of mindset around AI. But when you have a human do it, humans also make mistakes, just like AI can make mistakes. We, have talked in the past about how AI can hallucinate and so forth. But you never knew that the human made the mistake, right? Like the classic example of this is, if I'm sitting there processing mortgage documents, and I worked at a bank for a long time, 2 different banks, If you're processing mortgage documents and you accidentally type in the wrong account number on the document, well, that document is gone forever. Nobody's ever going to find it again because you typed in the wrong account number. So we would do things like double blind keying and make sure that, what one person keyed matched what the other person keyed and so forth. But, there always has been this risk. So while we can, yes, identify that, hey, this value was done by AI or this output was created by AI or something, we've always had the risk of mistakes, right? Whether that's the AI that makes the mistake or the human that made the mistake.
Although Alan Pell-Sharp, who we both know, joked with me that the difference is I can blame a human. I can't blame the AI. I
Oh,
can't
believe
take
me,
Copilot to
believe me.
court.
Plenty of people blame AI, and that will happen more and more, right? Like, I missed the meeting. Well, the AI forgot to tell me that the meeting was happening. It's its fault, not my fault.
Which is actually one of the reasons why AIM and some of our advocacy work with the US government, we've advocated specifically for shared responsibility. That
Yep,
you cannot blame that AI output solely on the AI developer. It's shared between the AI developer and the user and the organization itself.
totally.
Yeah. So going along with this Copilot thread, what are the security and privacy concerns that organizations really need to be thinking about when it comes to Copilot and bringing that into the enterprise?
Yeah, I'd say it's fundamentally the same thing as search, the same thing as Delve. Delve was a product that Microsoft made, I don't know, 10 years ago. And when we turned it on, customers immediately were like, oh my gosh, this thing is exposing all kinds of our private content. And we're like, no, it isn't. You never secured your content to begin with. You never put the right permissions and controls on that content. It was just sitting there waiting for someone to stumble on it. And nobody happened to stumble on it. But that in the industry is known as security through obscurity, right? Just because it's like kind of off to the side in a place that nobody looks doesn't make it secure. And so what we're seeing with Copilot, same thing with search, same thing with things like Delve in the past, is it will definitely surface things that you didn't realize that you hadn't secured. The difference versus what we had in the past, people would just say, oh my God, turn off Delve, right? But now nobody is going to say, oh my God, turn off AI, because everybody's like, we have to have AI. And so what that's doing is it's creating an imperative for folks to actually go through and properly classify and secure their information, which is like just the worst tasting medicine you could ever imagine. Like, it is hard work and nobody likes it, but we at AIM have been saying for decades that you need to do this. And well, most people don't want to, and it's a lot of extra work, and easier for me to just throw something in a SharePoint site and not think about what the permissions are and not put any metadata on it and so forth. But search would always expose those things. Things like Delve would expose those things, and things like Copilot will expose those things. And so there has never been a time, for all my fellow AIM members out there, there has never been a time where you're more important than the Sarbanes-Oxley era, more important than the Enron and all these crazy things that brought records management from the basement to the boardroom, as we would talk about in the industry. It has never been more important than now to have good information management, to have your content properly classified, properly secured, the right metadata on it, and so forth. Because if you don't, it's just going to become a challenge with AI. It just is. So yeah, and there's AI can help you with this. We literally build tools that will, figure out what the document is and apply the right retention on it and apply the right sensitivity label on it. Like, we have those tools at Microsoft. Will it be perfect? Of course it won't. Will it do a better job than the people would? Absolutely it will.
But having the tools available doesn't eliminate the need for having a strategy and
Oh, for sure,
someone
for sure.
who's
You got
the
to have the
expert and
policy,
can,
you got to have
yeah.
the strategy, you got to have people that run and apply the tools and review, spot check, and so forth, right? Absolutely. There's these are tools to help folks do those jobs, not to replace the folks doing those jobs, right? There's no utopia or panacea out there of, oh, just push this button and now all your data is properly classified, organized, right retention, right labels, all the right metadata, et cetera, right? It's not that.
So how do you then envision all of that functionality and those new responsibilities related to AI changing the role of the information management practitioner? What do you think like that role is going to look like, say, 5 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, when I was at Warehouser, I spent a lot of time with our records managers, a lot of time, and over in the records center, big warehouse full of boxes of paper and so forth, and those 100% still exist. We have not digitized all the paper. I don't think we ever will digitize all the paper, right? Doesn't make sense. But hopefully, AI capabilities and things that we have with, tools that we've built prior to Copilot, like Microsoft Syntax, are making it so that instead of you spending your day on the drudgery of labeling things and typing in metadata on things or feeding things through scanners and extracting that we have, systems in place that do a better job of that you're monitoring and you're setting up and you're managing and maintaining, as opposed to actually having to do the heavy lifting yourself. So that's, from my perspective, the big opportunity for everybody in information management is getting you out of having to be the librarian that is unboxing the books and putting the stickers on them and putting them on the shelves and updating the card catalog to, supervising the library. That'd be, where I hope we all end up.
Well, and it's funny that you say that because looking at the data from our 2024 Industry Watch report, one of the sort of surprise outcomes of that data was that it's showing that a lot of the survey respondents have a more supervisory role than they may have in
Mhm.
previous years, that
Yep.
they're typically mid-level management or above. They typically have direct reports. They're getting paid six figures on average. And that kind of lines up with what you're envisioning for that future role.
Yep, for sure, for sure.
Very interesting. So I want to go back a little bit because we talked a lot about the now and what's to come. But before we talk a little bit more about the future, I want to kind of talk about the past. So, what first got you into information management and SharePoint?
Well, a long story. It's been a long career here. What really got me into this, just to be super direct and share a nugget, is cookies, and not the kind of cookies in your browser, but really like cookies. I was a sophomore in college. I was walking through the student union, and there was a career fair thing, and they said there'd be cookies. I was like, I like cookies. I'll go to that. So I went to the career fair. I walk around, and I see booths from all these different employers, and one of them was Warehouser, and they were like, come for a tour of the data center and we'll have cookies. I was like, I like cookies, that's why I'm here, I'll go there and do that. And so I went for the tour, and they're like, hey, we don't hire sophomores in college, kid. But I didn't care because all I was there for was to see the cool data center and eat the cookies. And so I left. And then fast forward a year to my junior year, and I also saw the career fair sign and was like, hey, I got cookies last year, I'll go get cookies again. And then the same data center tour, hey, those were good cookies again. And they were like, wow, this kid must really want to work at Warehouser. And he's been here twice. No, I was just there for the free cookies, but they offered me an internship. And my first job as an intern was running a FileNet system, right? Writing code on a FileNet system and so forth. And so that's what got me into the industry. In 1998, I was a Warehouser intern, eating every free cookie I could find and writing, ASP code for our FileNet system. So yeah,
Does your compensation package still include cookies?
uh, I think probably Microsoft wishes they could pay me in cookies, and in some indirect way they do.
As a cost cutting measure, we're paying you in cookies.
Exactly, exactly.
That's hilarious.
Yep, but that is definitely the origin story of how I got into this industry, was my deep love for cookies
Were
as
you
a
were you a comp
college
sci
kid.
major? How did you know about?
Yep, I was a computer science major, and then when I got my internship and then ultimately my job at Warehouser, while I was still in college, I said, well, heck, if Warehouser's going to pay the bills, I'll get another major. And I did a business major also. So I have two undergraduate degrees, one in computer science and one in business.
Oh, interesting. And how has that served you having the business side and the
You know,
computers?
um, I would say particularly, no offense to my friends at Microsoft, but particularly at Microsoft, we tend to have a lot of the most brilliant technical minds in the world, that are fairly far from the business use cases and the business users of our product. You know, we have lots of brilliant business people as well in finance and marketing and sales and so forth, but being able to bridge that gap, understand the code that's being written. You know, I don't thankfully write any of the code at Microsoft these days because you don't want me to do that. But understand at a very deep technical level what's going on, but also be able to sit down and explain, you know, this is how retailers use an ECM system, and you know, this is what they use it for. You know, this is what a bill of lading and a proof of delivery is. This is, you know, how mortgages are written. You know, these are how insurance claims are handled. These are how invoices are paid, and so forth. That business side of things, being able to bring that to the team is a really great advantage. So yeah, it's served me very well.
How I think that's such an interesting nugget of knowledge because I know you and I have had conversations, and I've had conversations with other AIM leaders about how important it is for information management practitioners to have that business mindset so they can build a business case for an IM program, so they can understand the workflows better. So, how if I'm just entering information management, how do I come by that knowledge?
Yeah, the most important thing is to get out of your office or out of your house and go actually see the people that are having to use the system, right? Whether those are the people in accounts payable or the people in the claims department at your insurance company or the people that are writing the mortgages and servicing the mortgages and so forth at your bank, or the people at the stores that are actually using the systems. You know, we're working with a retailer right now who uses our stuff, you know, in their pharmacy and their bakery and their gas stations, et cetera. I won't say more than that, but to really understand how they're using it at a deep, deep level, and not just, you know, well, here's what we need from a records management perspective. No, no, no. Like, you have to think about how that's going to fit into the daily work process of these folks who are not records managers, don't care about records management, don't know that you exist, and think about how you're going to really streamline what they're doing. There's got to be something in it for them that makes their job a lot easier and better, or they're not going to help you with your job. That's just all there is to it.
And along those lines, while I think by and large compliance is still one of the major reasons why organizations invest in information management, there are many other really pressing reasons these days, like cost efficiency, increased productivity. What are what are you seeing in terms of that business case for information management? Why do you think people are investing in SharePoint right now, for instance?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, you know, in say 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, we were all talking about data is the new oil, right? Which, by the way, is not the best connotations for what we do, right? Oil is kind of a, you know, greasy, polluty kind of thing, right?
There.
And
Yeah.
so, you know, I think now of the content that is inside of your content management system, whether that's SharePoint or otherwise, is the rocket fuel for, you know, the rocket ship that is AI, right? It is the stuff that particularly a large language model needs. Language needs content, needs, you know, words on the page, and that's what we have in our systems more than any other place in the world. That information lives in the systems that information managers work in and manage and so forth, right? It lives in your FileNet system, your Documentum system, your Highland system, your SharePoint system. That is where it all is, right? All the most important stuff. You know, there's a lot of stuff that maybe isn't, it's still sitting on the file share, still sitting in the boxes in the warehouse. But for the last few decades, we have taken the most important stuff and managed it in these systems. And so now, as we think about AI and training AI and having AI help us and so forth, we want it to work on the most important things. And so the most important things are in these systems that we've been carefully curating and managing for decades. And so just an incredible opportunity for everybody here to think about all the most important stuff that you've got about your customers, about your business processes, about, you know, your products, that are inside of these content management systems, and use that as the jet fuel for AI that's going to take you, to the moon, right? The rocket fuel, not oil. It's
Not
a
oil.
refined,
Better analogy.
powerful capability that we have, right? It's not just oil.
Hearing you talk about it, it really feels like the scope is so much broader than it was even like 10 years ago. So when you're talking about like information management, it's not just one system, it's many systems, and it's not just one access point, it's many
For sure.
access points.
The joke in this industry has always been enterprise content management isn't enterprise at all. You look at the statistics that AIM and some of the other providers have out there. The average large company, not even Fortune 500, but just large company, has many of these different systems. There's not a single enterprise system. That's lies that vendors told to get you to sign an enterprise license agreement, right? Like, it's just the reality that there was one particular business unit or line of business that was driving buying a FileNet system for mortgage, and then there was an entirely different line of business system that was buying an OpenText Live Link system for HR records. And then there was an entirely different line of business system or line of business that was buying a Documentum system for this. And then IT was putting in SharePoint for a company-wide portal and so forth, right? So there's not a single system. There never was. Let's be real about it, right? So,
Well, we're still trying to come up with like the centralized repository. I feel like it's
yep.
just change. I mean,
Yep.
is that a
And we would tell you that OneDrive and SharePoint, OneDrive is built on top of SharePoint, is the most easy to use of all these systems, maybe beyond a file share, right? And so that tends to be the place where most of the content is, but it's not the place where all the content is. There are still, much to our dismay, these other fragmented systems around that have one particular or two particular use cases or line of business documents in them. And the job of the information manager is to manage their information and think about, well, does it make sense for it to stay over here in this one particular place that is more isolated? And if it does, totally okay, right? But if it doesn't, how do we get it into a place that's more centralized, it's easier to discover, easier to search, easier for AI to leverage and take advantage of, and so forth, right? And so that's a big part of the job of the information manager of today, as opposed to maybe 20 years ago where it was just focusing on that one system, right?
Yeah, I think your analogy about it's the difference between supervising the library and being the librarian's kind of apt there, because you're almost like a train conductor trying to figure out all these different access points and what the right protocol is and what version of that document should be
Yep.
used for
Yep.
whatever use case.
Exactly. Or back to our FAA example, you're in the control tower, you're not flying the plane, right? You got to
Yes.
let your business users fly the plane now, and you're in the air traffic control, making sure that they don't run into each other, right?
So, big picture, what do you feel like the information management industry is going to look like 5 years from now? What's going to happen next?
Uh, um, so I'll give you a kind of a self-serving answer to start with. And it will start by looking at the past. So in the early 80s, we had Ted Smith and the folks at FileNet who really took us into the modern era. Yes, there were things that Wang made and Kodak made and so forth before that, but FileNet was a pretty revolutionary product, and it became big and got bought by IBM. And in those days, FileNet had its own operating system and its own hardware and its own database. It was all totally proprietary. There was FDOS, the FileNet Disk Operating System. There were FileNet hardware, jukeboxes, and so forth that it ran on. And over the next couple of decades, it started to run on more commodity hardware, stuff from IBM and stuff from Sun and stuff from HP and stuff from Intel, right? And over time, it ran on commodity operating systems, not FDOS anymore, but Windows or AIX or Solaris or Linux or HPUX or what have you. And over time, it wasn't its own proprietary database. It ran on Oracle or it ran on SQL. So I think that we are right at the top of another one of those moments where you no longer have to write your own operating system. You no longer have to make your own hardware. You no longer have to make your own database. what if you no longer have to make your own content repository? All the folks in the industry that are making their own specific repository that does search and versioning and so forth, I believe we're all just kind of wasting our time doing that. And again, told you this was a self-serving answer. We have a thing called SharePoint Embedded that allows anyone to just use the exact same repository that M365 has, the exact same capabilities for security and compliance and data residency and governance and so forth behind their application. And so I do believe that over the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to see, just like folks saying, hey, we didn't need to make our own operating system and hardware and database. Maybe we don't need to spend all of our development efforts managing the documents in the repository and building the repository. We can use a commodity repository, just like we use a commodity operating system or database. And that will allow us to take all the resources that were just sitting there building versioning systems and search systems and so forth, to instead do more on the business side, do more on the business process, build vertical applications on top of that and so forth, take all of our resources and, drive more value than just making yet another thing that stores documents. So I don't think that's going to happen this year, but I do think over time, we've got the cloud, we've got AI, it's getting harder and harder and more costly to keep up with things like, M365 and SharePoint and so forth. I think there's a great opportunity, whether you're a vendor or you're a customer of the vendors, to say, hey, we're just going to use that system that's available to us today, and we're going to build applications on top of it instead of, heck, most of my job when I was on the customer side at JP Morgan and WAMU and Weyerhaeuser was like building the ECM system, patching the ECM system, testing the ECM system, putting policies in the ECM system, et cetera. Very little of my job was actually improving the business process and helping folks with their content and so on, right? And so if you no longer have all that system work because you can use something that's more of a commodity, I think that's going to, change our jobs a lot in this industry, but very much for the better. Instead of being the person that's, patching and upgrading the system and testing it all the time, you're actually helping your business users get the most out of it and build applications that matter to them.
And not to oversimplify why that occurred, why that move from proprietary to commodity happened, but is it because the value placement is now on the pace of change, or is it because the data itself is more valuable than the software or the hardware? What is
Yeah, I
behind
mean,
that
I think
shift?
it's always been the data itself is more valuable than the software or hardware, but the software and hardware got to a point where you didn't have to make your own thing. The operating systems and the hardware and the databases got good enough that you could use them without building your own thing. And that's what my argument would be for the repository, right? That it's gotten good enough that you don't have to build your own thing. You don't, you know, a few years ago, our friends at Gartner retired the Magic Quadrant for content services systems. And why did they do that? It was because there was no differentiation anymore, right? There was IBM and Microsoft and Highland and OpenText, and we all effectively had the same set of features. When it comes to the repository, the actual content services repository, they said there's nothing for us to write about anymore. Everybody has check-in, check-out, versioning, viewing, search, permissions, et cetera. So what was the point, right? Now, as they kind of rejuvenate this, they're focused on more about the business processes and the way these things are used in the industry and so forth, and that's exciting. But we kind of got to a point where it's all kind of the same, and so when it gets there, that's kind of the definition of a commodity, where it's all kind of the same, right? Commoditization. So, I don't want this to sound like a bleak outlook for the industry. It's a major change for everybody that we're going to be. And you can see this in AI also, right? Like the number of people who are making their own AI versus using, Copilot from us or Gemini from Google or, GPT from OpenAI, which is, partnered with us. There's not a lot. Yeah, of course, there's Llama from Facebook and there's Mistral and so forth, but you can kind of count them on a couple hands, right? The era of every single vendor has to make their own AI versus using something that's more commodity from one of the big,
Yeah.
providers, I think is closing.
As a consumer, though, I agree with you. I don't think it's a bleak picture. I think it actually gives more power to the consumer to change
Absolutely.
solution providers, to have more options, and also at a much lower cost when you're dealing with
Yep.
off-the-shelf products than if I were to like hire developers and do it myself.
Yep. Yep. Those days, when I was, I'll be a little careful here. When I was at Warehouser, we had multiple systems from multiple vendors. I worked on FileNet, but also Documentum, also Highland, a bunch of different systems. Um, we would sometimes pay like a couple $1,000s per user license. That's crazy times now,
Yeah.
right? And that's part of what kept us from, having enterprise-wide deployments and stuff. It was just so expensive, where now you can get, whether that's with M365 or one of the other providers, for a few dollars per user per month, right? Not thousands of dollars per user like it
Amazing.
used to be in the 90s, right? So yeah, it's definitely a story of much more value for much less money, as the industry has matured and again become a commodity, right? There was a time when pineapples were $100 a pineapple, and now pineapples, you go down to the grocery store and you buy one for $5, right? Because they've become a commodity. So, yep.
I'll also say that growing up, my grandmother would still put like oranges in my Christmas stocking.
Exactly. Yep, yep.
And it always surprised me. I was like, "What? Why'd she put an orange in here?"
Yep. A friend of mine, who grew up in Norway, talks about like the joy when the banana boat would come to town once a year, and you would buy one banana and like treasure it and eat it so slowly over the course of the day. Now you just go buy bananas. Even in Norway, you can just go buy bananas. They're everywhere, right? That's kind of how content management systems have been, right? It used to be like this secret guarded, valuable, expensive treasure, and now it's everywhere, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
That's frankly the story of SharePoint, right? We commoditized a lot of that capability. We almost did it too well that we created sprawl, and there's lots of vendors, including Microsoft, that will help you kind of organize and clean up all these things that spread so pervasively when SharePoint came along.
Yeah, and Teams made SharePoint a little bit harder. That was another sprawl.
Teams again expanded it, right? So now
Yeah.
every team has a SharePoint site under the covers. Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we would say it's better to have your stuff organized in Teams and SharePoint than having it
Yeah.
sitting on a file share or sitting on your hard drive, right? Of course. Could we do even better? Yep. And that's where we have things like autofill and Copilot and syntax and so forth to help you do even more with it.
So we've touched on so many themes already with this conversation, like information sprawl, accessibility of data, commoditized systems and ecosystems. In this sort of a world of endless possibilities, what what's your biggest tip for organizations and what they need to do to prepare for the future?
Well, I mean, get M365, SharePoint, and Copilot, of course. No.
Of course.
Of course, of course. I would say more than anything, you just need to, unfortunately, take your medicine a little bit, right? I talked about how, putting the right metadata and the right security and so forth on your information is medicine that nobody really likes to take. But, it doesn't have to be super hard. You can, just chip away at it, get a little better every day. You don't have to, so many customers that we talk to now say, I don't even know where to start. I have terabytes or petabytes of information. Where do I start? And we just say, look, think about like the most important parts of your business. Go talk to those folks, figure out where they're putting their information and help them store it and manage it, right? If you're a bank, the most important part of your business is going to be different than if you're a retailer, which is going to be different than if you're a healthcare provider. But figure out what that most important part of your business is and go talk to them and help them, get their stuff organized, start taking advantage of AI, make sure that they're following all the laws and, compliance and governance and so forth. Just prioritize it that way. You don't have to figure out how to, get all 8 petabytes of information that has ever been created in your organization managed tomorrow. Instead, just be very pragmatic about it and think about, we are a nonprofit. What is the most important thing that we do? Well, it's the whatever benefit we provide as a nonprofit, right? Let's go find the people that actually provide that benefit and talk to them and, figure out what they do from an information management perspective and make that better. And then we can think about, well, what's the next thing that supports those folks? Oh, well, maybe it's the folks that raise money for the nonprofit, right? So I use nonprofit as an example, not because AIM is a nonprofit, which hooray, AIM is a nonprofit, but it doesn't have to be some giant Fortune 500 company, right? You could be a healthcare provider and think about, well, what's the most important thing we do? Well, we provide healthcare to people. So how do we do that? Well, we have to intake patients, and then we have to give them care, and then we have to discharge patients. Think about the intake process, right? Think about the care process and all the records and documents that get created in that, and then think about the discharge process and go talk to those people inside your organization, right? If you're, making airplanes, well, you can think about it from that point of view, but that comes from, maybe it's the business degree, maybe it's that I spent the first dozen years of my life as a customer, but just think about what are the most important things your organization does and try to go help those things from an information management perspective. Not, oh my God, we got 12 petabytes on the file servers, we don't know where to begin, but just think about it from that point of view.
That's such a nice way to think about it. It's more palatable, but also I imagine that it sets you up for greater success with change management, because if you're segmenting and saying, okay, I'm just going to talk to my finance team, they become your champions. You roll out Copilot to them or whatever tool you want, and they can be the advocates within the organization. Look how great this was for us. It could work for you over in HR,
Yep, exactly right. Exactly right.
Excellent. And you can check out more about AIM at AIIM.org. Thanks, Ian, for being on AIM on Air.
Thanks, Tori, for having me.